this year's hunting season ended up being pretty much focused on whitetail, and a lot of that was because of my own choices that I made, which is not typically what I've done in the past. Typically spend the majority of the first couple months of the season, September, October, chasing western big game, whether that be antelope, mule deer, elk. But for the better part of a decade now, I have been having to travel a long ways west to do that every August, September, October. And so going into this fall, I was like, I love whitetail hunting. I love chasing whitetail. I can get several tags in surrounding states. I was like, why don't I just focus on whitetails going into this year? It'll allow me to travel slightly less, but still be able to spend a lot of time in the field. And that ended up not really being the case on the travel side of things. So I had a bunch of whitetail tags in my pocket going into the year, and originally thought that I might be, kind of in the area, be able to pop out for 3-4 days, chase deer, and then go back. But where the plans changed was my wife started doing travel occupational therapy. So originally we were thinking that she might be able to get a position kind of close to home, and we ended up in Idaho. And so we moved to Idaho in July, and here I am in a western state with no western tags. I've got no elk tags, no mule deer tags, nothing for Idaho, Montana, Colorado, nothing. So I had all these tags to chase whitetail, and not that that's a bad thing. It just meant that I was going to be doing a lot of driving east instead of west during those first couple months of the year. But the first trip of the year ended up having to drive like 15 hours to go hunt early season whitetails with my buddies over at Whitetail DNA, and that started the grind of the year. Had a super close call on a really big deer that week. Alex ended up being the only one that killed a buck that week, which was super fun to have a velvet deer down in camp. But the last day of the trip had a super close call, and we'll get into that right now. We just had a very heartbreaking moment here in North Dakota. Turns out the buck we were in here after was bedded at 75 yards the whole night we were in the tree. Watched him stand up, kind of feed in this real heavy brush to our left, and ended up bedding down at like 55, 60 yards. And watched him for a while, and then there's a major trail right below the tree here, about 10-15 yards, and all of a sudden Alex saw the deer in the short grass out of that brush, basically on the trail. And so both of us went hyper focused on waiting for that deer to walk out, and he had turned and gone up the edge of the thick stuff and popped out. The first time I saw him was probably about 85 yards, and then he went to the south and kind of was working his way towards the bean field to the south of us. So up and out of our lives, I have no idea how many inches, but gigantic frame of his just off into the sunset. So I got a couple more minutes, so maybe we'll get real lucky and that other deer will walk in the other direction and we can kill him. But that was rough. So after that initial early season velvet trip, was back out west, was able to scoop up a leftover tag and connect with Josh Hilliard and Mark Kenyon. And we spent another week trying to chase kind of that mid-September whitetail game, just playing creek crossings and everything in some real thick stuff along river bottom. One of the main bucks that we were going after, we found dead. There was not a lot of daylight activity. That kind of mid-September and area seemed to be pretty heavily pressured, had a few close calls on some things, but overall spent yet another week in the woods and not notching a tag. So at this point, it's only mid-September, and have had lots of sits, lots of time in the tree, kind of, hoping that, something's gonna break loose. But getting into kind of that later time frame in October, it was time to get back in tree. So that led into a grind until it worked out. And it was just sit after sit after sit after sit after sit of more or less seeing no deer or very few deer, or, you know, trying new spots, bouncing around, hunting different states, you know, trying to kind of play where my best odds were, whether based on weather conditions. It was unseasonably warm for the majority of October and early November, so I was spending a lot of time, you know, chasing stuff that wasn't really moving during the day. And so there was a lot of days I was out there trying to figure out just exactly what and why I was out there in the woods. It was kind of the cards that I had in my hand, so I had to play, you know, to that hand and see if I could make it happen. So kind of hunted all through the second half of October and in early November, and still hadn't really had even a good encounter. Just had to, you know, bring a little luck into camp. So we always do a family deer camp every year, and it's awesome. We get, you know, it's typically 4 or 5 of us, and this season there was 4 of us, so it was me, my dad, my brother, and my uncle all in camp. Just being close proximity with my dad, he was able to hunt a couple days ahead of when camp started. You know, I have a lot of fun trying to help put the pieces together for other people, and there's a little spot where you need the perfect wind for it, and the wind was going to be shifting to that in the afternoon. So we had both hunted different spots in the morning, and then about noon, 12:30, we hiked in, and I hung a set and got him in the tree, and then I snuck out. I had barely gotten back to get cleaned up, and I got a phone call that he had shot a deer. So I think he had been in the tree for maybe 45 minutes to an hour, and a good buck walked by and he shot it. So I got dressed again and like in my gear and went back out and hauled that buck out, and super fired up for him. And then 2 days later, my uncle had showed up, Josh was on the way. I obviously still had a tag, had a spot that we hadn't hunted all year, and again, had the perfect wind for it. And so him and I hiked in, and I got my uncle up a tree, and then I left, went and hopped in a different spot. I got a text from my dad asking where the game cart was, and my uncle had shot a buck about an hour and a half into the sit. And so I climbed down, went over, and at this point, Josh had shown up, and we went in, hauled my uncle's deer out. Josh got in the same tree as my uncle. We got my uncle's deer out, and I went and got in another spot, which is a really simple spot that I can hunt like the last 45 minutes of the day. And there was only about 15 minutes of light left, and it was deer were running everywhere. I had one little buck come right to the decoy. Just a lot of, you know, some cool interactions, and got a text from Josh that he had also shot a deer. So 2 deer in the same day out of the same tree within a span of about 4 hours. Back to the rig, went and met up with those guys again, got Josh's deer hauled out of there. And then that night we had an absolutely horrendous storm come in, and what we thought was gonna be about 10 to 15 inches of snow ended up being just a giant ice storm. And it kind of made the woods super dangerous, especially that first day. Just all of the trees were carrying too much ice, and lots of branches breaking down and big trees falling down. So I actually went out and hunted a spot where we could hunt from the ground, kind of a spot in a little thicket, a little opening in a cedar thicket. I did a big calling sequence, rattled, ran around, grunted, looked like an idiot, crashing through the ice and stuff in the grass, but got tucked back in. And right before shooting light was up, had a really good buck come into that opening. I don't know exactly what happened. I think I had a decoy attached to my bow, and there was a cedar bough above me. And I think what happened is I was sitting in a chair, had the decoy on, and as I drew back, the decoy was hitting that limb, and I think it was pushing my bow down just a little bit. And so when I shot, I didn't follow through, and I just hit forward and low of that deer. That one really took the wind out of my sails that night, because man, it was just hard to hunt in that ice, and everything was loud, and there just weren't a lot of deer moving just because of how much that system really shut the deer down. Hunted the whole next day, didn't have any luck. Again, couldn't really get in a tree. Hunted a ground blind that morning, hunted from the ground that night. The next morning, went into a spot that we call the Rooster, and went in there, and just everything about it felt wrong. You're hiking in, it sounds like you're walking across broken glass the whole time. It's just kind of a nightmare getting in. Climbing up the ladder was icy and loud, and getting the second tree stand in for Josh to sit in was loud. It was like 15 degrees. Sometimes when it seems like everything is going wrong, is when it kind of all pans out. So this was the 35th day that I had whitetail hunted this season, and it finally all came together.
That's the deer we came in here after. He's down right there.
Yeah,
Oh my God, I have no idea how long I held back.
you were shaking pretty good.
I had to put the cam, I'm sitting, I had to put the cam on my knee. I mean, it was 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, I have no idea.
I don't either. It's a long time. Oh. Yes! Nice job, man. Oh.
Yes!
Done!
Oh my God,
We did it.
we did it! Oh my God.
Oh, it's a big buck. Congratulations.
Oh, thanks, man.
Yeah, you put in the time on that guy. Oh, dude.
Oh my God, I can't believe that came together. Like everything about this is
Yeah.
just,
Woo.
thank God he turned.
I know. I was the other just
And then, yeah, I mean, I'm sure you saw I had to like,
yeah.
try to
And
get
then
out
you
of the
shift
brain.
way around.
He's recording.
You're on.
Yeah, let's go find this thing. With the snow and everything, and just to kind of recap this trip, the day Josh showed up, both our uncle and him killed a deer, and our dad had killed a deer 2 days before, and then we had a major storm roll in, and what we thought was going to be about a foot of snow ended up being a lot of ice, and so getting in trees was actually pretty dangerous there for a couple days. And we knew that this spot might be just a little bit better. It's a pine tree that the stand is in, and they've been faring better in the ice. And we got in here, and walking across this, prairie grass is just like walking through glass, and so it's super loud entry, and just nothing about it felt all that good other than the fact that it's November 12th and the temp is right for deer to be moving. And I don't even know what time it is, but it was probably about 8:30 when spotted a doe, and she was moving into this real thick stuff. Looked like she was coming to bed, and then we thought there might be 2 deer, and I let out a couple grunts to see maybe if there was a buck in there. And we're pretty sure that doe ran a screenplay, because she came out and came right through this little scrape and then kind of blew across this opening where my shooting lane was, and all of a sudden we heard a grunt, and he was following her, and he came in, and I came to full draw and thought he was going to come into that opening, and he stopped right in that scrape and was just like chewing on stuff and kind of messing around. I have no idea how long I was drawn back for, but finally he turned broadside, and I had to shift way back in my seat to shoot around a branch, and shot and just made it count, which is a blessing, because I messed up the other night on a different deer. But yeah, we got the troops on the way with the deer cart, and I think it's time to take some photos and then do some celebrating. It's been a heck of a year.